Canadian motor carrier hopes for higher rates seem to have been tempered by the reality of a slow-growing economy. Only about half of Canadian motor carrier executives responding to our latest Transportation Buying Trends survey indicated they expected higher core pricing this year, and the majority were looking at increases, excluding surcharges, below 5%. That's a sharp contrast to the hefty increases carrier executives have been calling for to restore their battered bottom lines. Have they been finding stronger than anticipated opposition among shippers? Our recent Surface Transportation Summit, a one-day event presented in partnership with Dan Goodwill and Associates, included an in-depth discussion on rates, sponsored by Shaw Traffic. To better understand the shipper mindset on pricing, Editorial Director Lou Smirlis asked executives representing two of the nation's largest shippers what shapes their decision-making when they're dealing with carriers.
For us, it really is about pushing initiatives to reduce costs. We're in a very fresh environment. It's important to our business, and speed to market is key. And we're to the point where we're looking for carriers too that have a little bit of more diversity, not just the carrier, but what other added values are there in terms of consolidation centers, etc. It's really about understanding the strengths of the shippers, of the carriers, understanding our complete network, and I think that really is the key. And there really isn't a lot of magic to this. If I have freight into Quebec, into the Atlantic, and I have, I have 1,000 loads a week that come out of the U.S., and if a carrier has freight from the Atlantic into the U.S., I can fill that third leg. You sit down, you talk about these things, and those are the synergies that you find, but you only find those synergies through a truly collaborative process. And I'd say to you, that to us is our number one driving force when we're dealing with the carrier community today.
So clearly, shippers are looking at a wider picture when it comes to rate negotiations. Still, when it comes down to it, do they treat all carriers the same from a freight rate standpoint, or is each carrier treated differently? Does it make sense from both a flexibility and a cost control standpoint for shippers to include in their stable of transportation providers both carriers who provide best-in-class service for a higher rate and carriers who simply provide low-cost service for lower rates?
Every carrier has its own strengths and constraints, so it's certainly necessary to treat each carrier differently. I think how differently really depends on a lot of factors, such as regional presence or their existing customer base, their own strengths and weaknesses, and their asset base, their driver structure, and in relation to our own demand.
I think you always need a mix of carriers in your stable. I don't prescribe to the low-cost carrier. We prescribe to the best-cost carrier, and that comes cost and service. We look at things like the carriers running the right equipment. In several of our scenarios, we're asking carriers to pull our billboards down the highway, so it's extremely important that it's not just the low-cost solution. But that doesn't say that smaller carriers with good costs can't be the right solution either. And again, it comes down to if you have a right mix and you have the right synergy and you have the right lane and you've got the right niche for a smaller carrier and they can execute on costs and they can execute on service, why wouldn't we want to have them in our stable? And by the same token, we have larger carriers in our stable that provide cost and proper service as well. I think the expectations between those two carriers is what really is a differentiator at the end of the day. Whether you're a small carrier or a big carrier, we're going to hold you to a standard.
Be sure to sign up for our next Surface Transportation Summit taking place October 16th in Mississauga. To watch the rest of our videos on rate negotiations, find our video archives online.